The arena floor trembled beneath thousands of feet as competitors from across the Galactic Collective gathered for the ceremony. Maya Chen stood near the back of the assembly hall, her simple gray combat suit a stark contrast to the elaborate armor and bio-enhancements worn by most other challengers. She had placed 99th out of 100 participants in the preliminary arena challenges, a fact that had been announced with barely concealed amusement by the collective's officials. Around her, beings from dozens of species towered over her human frame. The Kralix warriors, with their 4 arms and crystalline exoskeletons, stood in clusters discussing battle strategies. The Vexnar, serpentine creatures capable of moving at blinding speeds, coiled near the northern entrance. Even the Dulrathi, known across the galaxy as a peaceful merchant species, had sent representatives whose genetic modifications made them formidable opponents. Maya felt the weight of their dismissive glances, heard the subtle hisses and clicks of alien laughter as she passed. The arena challenges were not merely competitions. They were the collective's method of testing species for full membership status. Humanity had been granted provisional status 3 years ago, after first contact with a collective exploration vessel. Since then, humans had been judged, measured, and found wanting in nearly every metric the advanced civilizations valued. Humanity's technology lagged centuries behind. Their physical capabilities were unremarkable compared to species evolved on high-gravity worlds or in more hostile environments. Their lifespan was brief, their senses limited, their bodies fragile. Maya had volunteered for the arena challenges knowing the odds. Earth's government had sent 100 of their finest, soldiers and athletes and enhanced fighters who represented the best humanity could offer. Maya had been the last selection, chosen not for her combat prowess, but for her background as a xenobiologist and survival specialist. Someone in the selection committee had argued that the challenges might require more than brute strength. That argument had barely won her a spot. The preliminary challenges had proven brutal. Maya had survived, but only just. In the endurance test, through toxic swamps, she had finished dead last while Kralix warriors carried equipment 3 times her weight. During the zero-gravity combat simulations, she had been eliminated within minutes while other species demonstrated natural adaptations for 3-dimensional warfare. The weapons proficiency trials had been only marginally better. Maya could shoot, but her reflexes could not match beings who perceived time differently than humans. By the 4th day of preliminaries, the rankings had been clear. Maya Chen, representing humanity, had secured the 99th position. The only being below her was a Phlox ambassador who had entered as a diplomatic gesture and spent most challenges reciting poetry. Earth's other 98 representatives had performed better, some reaching the top 40, but none had cracked the top 10. The galaxy's dominant species held those positions, as they always had. The commentators had been particularly cruel. During the live feeds transmitted across the collective's networks, analysts had discussed humanity's poor showing with clinical detachment. One Vexnar strategist had suggested that humanity should perhaps focus on service roles, rather than seeking full membership. A Kralix general had stated, not unkindly, that humans seemed unsuited for a universe that demanded more robust qualities. The feeds had reached Earth, and Maya knew people back home had watched her failures broadcast across every screen. Now, as the ceremony concluded and officials announced the next phase, Maya forced herself to stand straight. The final challenge would begin in 3 days. Unlike the preliminaries, which had tested individual skills, the final challenge would take place on Kyvor 9, a planet designated as a proving ground. 100 challengers would be dropped into different zones of the planet's wilderness. Their task was simple: survive for 20 days, reach the extraction point, and document any significant discoveries. Those who succeeded would bring honor to their species. Those who failed would simply be removed from consideration. HFY 9 is not a gentle world, announced Arch Coordinator Velith, a being whose species had evolved on a planet with crushing gravity and perpetual storms. Velith's voice resonated through translation devices everyone wore. Your preliminary ranks will determine your starting zones. Those who placed highest will begin nearest the extraction point in the most favorable terrain. Those who placed lowest will start in the outer wilderness, in zones we have designated as extreme risk. Maya felt her stomach tighten. 99th place meant she would begin in one of the worst possible locations. She glanced at the holographic display showing HFY 9's topography. The planet was massive, with gravity 1.4 times Earth standard. Its ecosystems were considered some of the most dangerous in charted space, home to predators that had evolved in a high-competition environment. The outer zones, where Maya would start, were marked in red with warning symbols. You will each carry a standard survival pack, Velith continued. No weapons beyond a basic blade, no communication devices beyond your emergency beacon. Your translation implants will function, and you will each wear a monitoring band that will record your vital signs and experiences. Use the emergency beacon, and you will be extracted immediately, but you will forfeit the challenge. The planet's ecosystem is carefully monitored. You are forbidden from causing unnecessary harm to indigenous life. Hunt only what you need to survive. Leave no permanent damage. The other challengers seemed unconcerned. Many came from species that could survive in vacuum or endure extremes that would kill a human within minutes. Maya had no such advantages. Her only edge was knowledge. She had spent 3 years studying xenobiology, learning to read alien ecosystems, understanding how life adapted to different environments. On paper, that knowledge seemed worthless compared to the raw physical power surrounding her. In practice, she hoped it might keep her alive. The ceremony ended, and challengers dispersed to their assigned preparation facilities. Maya walked alone through corridors filled with beings who barely acknowledged her presence. She passed a group of Kralliks sharing stories of previous hunts. She overheard Vexnar discussing the fastest route to the extraction point. No one discussed strategy with her. No one offered advice or alliance. She was 99th, an afterthought, someone who would likely trigger her emergency beacon within the first few days. In her assigned quarters, Maya reviewed everything she could access about HFY 9. The planet had been seeded with life by the collective millions of years ago as part of a terraforming experiment. The ecosystems had evolved without intervention, creating a world of incredible biodiversity and fierce competition. The database contained thousands of species files, from microscopic organisms to apex predators weighing several tons. Maya absorbed what she could, noting patterns, understanding relationships between predator and prey, recognizing which plants were edible and which were toxic. She paid particular attention to the apex predators. The dominant land predator on HFY 9 was a species the collective had designated as rift stalkers. The files showed creatures that stood 3 meters at the shoulder, with 6 legs, armored hide, and intelligence that approached sentience. Rift stalkers hunted in family groups and were fiercely territorial. They had never attacked collective personnel, but the warnings were clear. Avoid them whenever possible, never approach their young, and never come between a rift stalker and its prey. The images showed creatures of terrible beauty. Their bodies perfectly adapted for HFY 9's high gravity and competitive ecosystem. Their eyes held an intelligence that unsettled Maya. These were not simple beasts. They were survivors of millions of years of evolution, creatures that had earned their position at the top of the food chain through cunning and strength. Maya downloaded everything she could to her personal datapad, knowing she would not have access once on the planet. She studied terrain maps, weather patterns, seasonal behaviors of various species. She reviewed survival techniques, medical procedures, and emergency protocols. By the time exhaustion forced her to sleep, her mind was overflowing with information she hoped she could recall when needed. The next 2 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Maya attended mandatory briefings where officials outlined additional rules and procedures. She received her survival pack, a standardized kit that contained basic medical supplies, a water filtration unit, a thermal blanket, rope, and the single blade she was permitted. The blade was made from composite materials, sharp enough to cut through most organic matter, but designed to break if used improperly. It was a tool, not a weapon, and Maya knew it would provide little protection against the predators she might face. On the final evening before deployment, Maya sat alone in her quarters and recorded a message for Earth. She knew it would not be transmitted until after the challenge concluded, but she wanted to speak her thoughts while she still could. "My name is Maya Chen," she said to the camera. "Tomorrow I will be dropped into a wilderness that has defeated beings much stronger than me. I am not a warrior. I am not enhanced or modified or particularly special. I placed 99th out of 100 because I could not match the physical capabilities of species that have had millions of years more evolution than humanity. But I am human, and that means something. We are adaptable. We are stubborn. We notice things others miss. We survive not because we are the strongest, but because we refuse to give up. I do not know if I will succeed, but I promise that I will try, and I will do everything I can to show the galaxy that humanity deserves respect, even if we are not the most powerful species among the stars." She ended the recording and tried to sleep. Her dreams were filled with images of alien wilderness and creatures that hunted in the dark. Morning arrived with an announcement over the communication system. All challengers were to report to the deployment hangar. Maya, dressed in her combat suit, checked her survival pack one final time and made her way through the station's corridors. The hangar was massive, filled with transport shuttles that would carry challengers to their designated zones. Maya found her assigned shuttle, a small craft that would carry only her and a pilot. The pilot was a Dolrathi, a species known for their calm demeanor. The being regarded Maya with large, gentle eyes as she boarded. "You are the human who placed 99th, the pilot said, the translator rendering the words in a melodic tone. "Your starting zone is in the southern highland wilderness. The terrain is difficult, and the local predators are particularly aggressive. Few expect you to last more than a week." Maya strapped herself into the passenger seat. "Then I will surprise them," she said quietly. The pilot made a sound that might have been approval or amusement. "Perhaps. I have learned not to underestimate species simply because they appear weak. Good fortune, small warrior." The shuttle launched, joining dozens of others departing from the station. Through the viewport, Maya watched as they approached Kyvor 9. The planet grew larger, revealing continents covered in dense forest, mountain ranges that pierced the clouds, and vast oceans that reflected the system's yellow sun. It was beautiful and terrifying, a world shaped by forces far older than human civilization. The shuttle entered the atmosphere, and Maya felt the increase in gravity pressing against her chest. Her suit's systems compensated, providing support for her muscles and organs, but she could feel the difference. This world would be exhausting simply to move through. The shuttle descended through clouds, and Maya glimpsed the landscape below. Dense jungle gave way to rocky highlands dotted with twisted vegetation. Rivers carved through valleys, and in the distance, mountains rose like the bones of some ancient god. The pilot brought the shuttle down in a clearing surrounded by tall, dark trees with bark that looked like stone. "This is your deployment zone," the pilot announced. "Step out carefully. The local atmosphere is breathable but carries spores that may irritate your respiratory system until you acclimate. Your monitoring band is active. Your emergency beacon will summon extraction within 1 hour if triggered. The extraction point is 400 kilometers to the north. May your journey be swift." Maya unsealed the harness and stood, feeling the pull of Kyvor 9's gravity. She gathered her pack, checked that her blade was secure at her hip, and moved to the exit ramp. The pilot opened the door, and the smell of alien wilderness flooded in. It smelled of rich earth and strange flowers, of moisture and growing things that had no equivalent on Earth. Maya stepped onto the ramp and descended to the surface of Kyvor 9. The moment her boots touched the ground, the shuttle lifted off. The pilot had delivered her and would now proceed to transport other challengers to their zones. Maya watched the craft rise into the sky and disappear beyond the tree line. Then she was alone. Standing in a clearing on an alien world, with 20 days ahead of her and 400 kilometers to travel through one of the most dangerous ecosystems in the known galaxy. She took a breath, feeling the slight burn in her lungs the pilot had mentioned. The air was rich with oxygen, more than Earth standard, which would help with the increased gravity. Maya activated her data pad and pulled up the terrain map. North was the direction she needed to travel, through highlands that would eventually descend into forest before reaching the extraction zone. The map showed no detailed paths, only topographical information. She would need to navigate by landmarks and compass. Maya chose a direction and began walking. The vegetation was dense, with plants that seemed to be a hybrid of earth ferns and something more alien. Their fronds were deep purple, and they released tiny bioluminescent spores when disturbed. The ground was uneven, covered in roots that twisted across the soil like serpents. In the distance, she could hear sounds, calls of creatures she could not identify, rustling in the undergrowth, the gurgle of water running over stone. Every sound made her alert. Every movement in the periphery of her vision caused her to pause and assess. This was not Earth. The rules here were different, shaped by evolution she did not fully understand. Maya moved carefully, placing each foot deliberately, trying to leave minimal trace of her passage. She was prey here, and the hunters were all around her, waiting for any sign of weakness. As the first day wore on, Maya covered perhaps 15 kilometers, far less than she had hoped. The gravity made every step an effort, and the terrain refused to cooperate. She found a stream and used her filtration unit to fill her water containers. She identified several plant species from her studies, including one with fruit that was technically edible but would cause digestive distress. She chose not to eat it, relying instead on the concentrated nutrient bars in her survival pack. As evening approached, Maya searched for shelter. She found an outcropping of rock that formed a small cave, barely large enough for her to lie down in, but defensible. She gathered dry vegetation to mask her scent and arranged stones at the entrance that would create noise if disturbed. Then she settled in, her blade in hand, and watched as Kyvor 9's sun set and the wilderness transformed. The night was not dark. The plants glowed with soft bioluminescence, creating a landscape of gentle lights that shifted with the wind. In the distance, she heard roars and calls, the sounds of predators beginning their hunts. Something large moved through the forest below her position, causing trees to sway. Maya held her breath, remaining absolutely still until the creature passed. She did not sleep that first night. She could not afford to. Instead, she watched and listened, learning the rhythms of this alien world, understanding what sounds meant danger and what sounds were simply the background noise of a living ecosystem. By dawn, she was exhausted but alive, and that was enough. Maya's second day on Kyvor 9 began with rain. Not the gentle rain of Earth, but sheets of water that fell with the weight of the planet's heavy gravity, hammering against the landscape with force that could bruise exposed skin. She remained in her shelter until the worst passed, then emerged to find the world transformed. The streams had become torrents, and the vegetation seemed to have grown overnight, reaching toward nutrients the rain provided. She continued north, navigating by the sun when it appeared through breaks in the cloud cover. The terrain was becoming more difficult, rising into hills covered with sharp-edged stones that cut through her boot material if she stepped carelessly. Maya's pace slowed as exhaustion accumulated. The high gravity was a constant burden, making her muscles burn with every step. She rationed her nutrient bars carefully, knowing she would need to supplement her supplies soon by foraging. On the third day, she encountered her first major predator. The creature emerged from thick undergrowth as Maya crossed a narrow valley. It stood on 4 legs, each ending in claws that seemed designed for both climbing and tearing. Its head featured too many eyes, arranged in a pattern that probably gave it exceptional depth perception. The creature was the size of a large dog, but on HFY 9, even medium-sized predators were deadly. Maya froze. She had read about this species, a mid-tier hunter called a spine stalker. They typically hunted in pairs, which meant another was likely nearby. The creature watched her, head tilted, analyzing whether she was prey or threat. Maya kept her hand away from her blade, knowing that any aggressive movement might trigger an attack. Instead, she made herself as large as possible, raising her arms and making a loud, deep sound that came from her diaphragm. The spine stalker's ears flattened. It took a step back, confused by the strange behavior of this unfamiliar creature. Maya shouted again, maintaining eye contact, projecting confidence she did not feel. The predator hesitated, then turned and disappeared into the undergrowth. Maya remained still for several minutes, waiting to see if it would return or if its partner would appear. When nothing happened, she carefully continued on her way, changing her route to avoid the area where the spine stalker had vanished. That evening, as she searched for shelter, Maya's monitoring band vibrated. She checked the display and saw a notification from the challenge coordinators. The message was brief. 37 challengers have triggered emergency beacons. 63 remain in competition. More than a third of the participants had already withdrawn, unable or unwilling to continue facing HFY 9's dangers. Maya wondered if any of Earth's representatives were among them, but the system provided no details about who had withdrawn. She found shelter in the hollow of a massive tree, its interior carved out by some process she did not understand. The space was dry and defensible, and Maya took the opportunity to treat the blisters forming on her feet and the bruises covering her legs. Her body was adapting to the gravity, but slowly and every day brought new aches. She ate a nutrient bar and some bitter roots she had identified as safe, then forced herself to sleep for a few hours. Days blurred together as Maya pushed north. She learned to read the land, understanding which areas would be dangerous and which offered relative safety. She avoided obvious game trails where predators would hunt. She moved during the middle of the day when many creatures rested in the heat. She foraged constantly, supplementing her dwindling supplies with edible plants and fungi. Her blade became an essential tool, used for cutting vegetation, digging for roots, and preparing makeshift shelters. On the 7th day, she encountered evidence of another challenger. She found marks on trees, deliberate cuts that indicated someone had passed this way. Following the trail, she discovered a campsite that had been abandoned hastily. Equipment lay scattered, and there was blood on the ground. Maya examined the scene carefully, noting claw marks on a nearby tree and the pattern of destruction. Whatever had attacked the challenger had been large and fast. She found no body, which hopefully meant the person had triggered their beacon and been extracted. She salvaged what supplies she could from the abandoned equipment, including a partially full water container and some uncontaminated food packets, then moved on quickly, not wanting to linger in an area where a major predator had recently fed. The highlands were gradually giving way to forested lowlands. The vegetation became denser, and the sounds of wildlife increased. Maya heard the calls of creatures in the canopy above, saw evidence of larger animals in the tracks pressed into muddy ground. She was making progress, covering perhaps 20 kilometers per day now that her body had somewhat adapted to the gravity, but she was still far from the extraction point, with only 13 days remaining. On the 9th day, everything changed. Maya was moving through a section of forest where massive trees created a canopy so thick that the ground below existed in perpetual twilight. She heard it before she saw it, a roar that shook the air, a sound so deep and powerful that she felt it in her chest. Maya immediately dropped to the ground and remained absolutely still, her heart hammering. The roar came again, closer now, and Maya recognized it from the files she had studied. A rift stalker, the apex predator of Kyvor 9, the creature that every challenger had been warned to avoid at all costs. She pressed herself against the base of a tree, trying to become invisible, barely daring to breathe. Through the undergrowth, she caught glimpses of movement. The rift stalker was even more massive than the images had suggested. It moved on 6 powerful legs, each step causing the ground to tremble slightly. Its hide was dark, covered in plates that overlapped like armor. The head was broad, with eyes that gleamed with intelligence. This was not a mindless beast. This was a creature that ruled its territory through both strength and cunning. The rift stalker paused, its head turning as it scented the air. Maya's blood turned to ice. She was downwind, but her scent was still present, foreign and strange in this ecosystem. The creature took a step in her direction, then another. Maya calculated her options. Running would trigger a chase response. Fighting was suicide. Her only hope was to remain absolutely still and hope the rift stalker decided she was not worth the effort. The creature approached to within 10 meters. Maya could see every detail now, the scars on its hide from old battles, the way its muscles moved beneath its armor, the intelligence in its eyes as it studied the area where she hid. Then, suddenly, the rift stalker's attention shifted. It turned away from Maya's position, focusing on something deeper in the forest. It roared again, a sound of challenge or warning, and then it was moving, crashing through the undergrowth with surprising speed for something so large. Maya remained frozen for several minutes after the creature disappeared. Then slowly, she rose and began moving in the opposite direction, keeping low and quiet. Her hands were shaking from the adrenaline, and her mind was racing. She had just survived an encounter with the most dangerous predator on the planet purely through luck. The rift stalker had been distracted by something else, something that had priority over investigating a strange scent. She covered another 5 kilometers before allowing herself to rest, finding shelter in a dense thicket where she would be hidden from casual observation. As she sat there, catching her breath and calming her nerves, she realized something. The rift stalker's roar had not been aggressive. There had been something else in it, a tone that suggested distress or urgency. Maya had spent years studying animal behavior, and she recognized the difference between a hunting call and a call of alarm. The next morning, Maya heard the roar again, distant but unmistakable. It came from the west, from an area she had already passed. Throughout the day, as she continued north, she heard it repeatedly, always from roughly the same location. By evening, curiosity overcame caution. Maya knew she should continue toward the extraction point, knew that every moment she delayed was a risk, but something about those roars bothered her. An intuition born from years of working with animals in various environments. She changed course, heading west toward the source of the sounds. The terrain became rougher, rising into a series of rocky hills cut through by deep ravines. The vegetation was sparser here, and Maya moved carefully, aware that she would be more visible. As she climbed a ridge, she heard the roar again, very close now, coming from somewhere below. Maya crept to the edge of the ridge and looked down into a ravine. What she saw made her breath catch. The Rift Stalker was there, the same one she had encountered before. She recognized the scar pattern on its hide. But it was not alone. The creature was lying on its side, and next to it, pressed against its massive body, were two cubs. The cubs were small, perhaps the size of large Earth dogs, though still formidable by human standards. They had the same armored hide as their parent, the same intelligent eyes, but there was a vulnerability to them that Maya recognized instantly. They were young, probably less than a year old, still dependent on their mother for protection and food. The mother Rift Stalker was injured. Maya could see the wound now, a deep gash along the creature's side where the armor had been penetrated. Blood stained the rocky ground. The creature was alert but weakened. And Maya understood immediately what had happened. The Rift Stalker had been injured, probably in a territorial fight with another apex predator, or perhaps by something else entirely. Unable to hunt, unable to move easily, the creature had retreated to this ravine with her cubs. She was calling out, but not for help. There was no help coming. She was warning away other predators, protecting her young even in her weakened state. Maya pulled back from the edge of the ridge, her mind racing. This was not her problem. The natural order of Kyvor 9 was not her responsibility. She should continue to the extraction point, focus on her own survival. Getting involved with an apex predator, even an injured one, was suicidal. Yet as she sat there, she thought about those cubs and what would happen to them. Without their mother, the cubs would die. They were too young to hunt for themselves, too small to defend against other predators. Even if the mother survived her injuries, she might not be able to hunt effectively enough to feed herself and her young. The cubs would starve slowly, or they would be killed by competitors who saw them as future threats or simply as easy meals. Maya thought about the principle of non-interference, the rule that collective species followed when observing developing ecosystems. She thought about the challenge rules that forbade causing unnecessary harm to indigenous life. She thought about how the galaxy viewed humanity as weak and unremarkable, placing 99th out of 100. Then she thought about what made humans different, what quality they possessed that other species seemed to lack or had evolved past. Humans helped. Even when it was illogical, even when it provided no benefit, even when it might be dangerous, humans saw suffering and felt compelled to act. It was not always wise, it was not always successful, but it was fundamentally, essentially human. Maya made her decision. She worked her way carefully down into the ravine, approaching from an angle where the mother Rift Stalker could see her clearly. She moved slowly, making herself as non-threatening as possible, keeping her hands visible and away from her blade. The Rift Stalker's head rose as Maya appeared, and the creature's eyes fixed on her with laser focus. A low growl rumbled from deep in its chest, a clear warning. "I know," Maya said softly, even though the translation device could not convey her words to a non-sentient creature. "I know you do not trust me. I know I should not be here, but I am going to help you anyway." The Rift Stalker's growl intensified. The cubs scrambled closer to their mother, their small voices making distressed sounds. Maya stopped at the edge of the clearing, perhaps 15 meters from the injured creature. She slowly unsealed her survival pack and withdrew the medical supplies. The kit was designed for human use, but the basics of wound treatment were universal. Clean, disinfect, seal. She displayed the supplies, letting the Rift Stalker see that she held no weapons. Then, moving with glacial slowness, she advanced. The mother creature watched every movement, body tense despite her injuries. When Maya was within 5 meters, the Rift Stalker lunged forward, snapping massive jaws that could have easily severed Maya in half. But the movement was weak, hampered by the injury, and Maya had anticipated it. She stopped and waited. "I am not prey," Maya said quietly. And I am not a threat to your cubs. Look at me. Really look. The Rift Stalker stared at her, breathing heavily from the exertion of the lunge. Maya met the creature's eyes, projecting calm and purpose. She thought about every moment she had spent working with frightened animals on Earth. Every injured creature she had treated, every hostile encounter she had diffused through patience and understanding. This was no different, except in scale and consequence. Minutes passed. The cubs whimpered. The mother's eyes never left Maya. Then slowly, the Rift Stalker lowered her head back to the ground. It was not trust. It was exhaustion and calculation. The creature was determining whether killing this small intruder was worth the energy expenditure when her wounds already weakened her. Maya took it as permission. She advanced again, moving to the injured side where the wound was clearly visible. Up close, the damage was severe. Something with claws or blades had torn through the armored hide, exposing muscle beneath. The wound was already showing signs of infection, the edges inflamed and seeping. Without treatment, the Rift Stalker would likely die within days. Maya opened her medical kit and began working. She used antiseptic spray designed for human use, hoping the chemical composition would be effective on Kyvor 9 biochemistry. The Rift Stalker flinched at the first application but remained still. Maya worked steadily, cleaning the wound as thoroughly as she could. Removing debris and damaged tissue, she used synthetic skin patches to cover the exposed areas, sealing them as best she could. It was crude field medicine designed for human injuries, but it was better than nothing. The entire process took over an hour. The Rift Stalker remained still throughout, though Maya could feel the tension in the creature's body, the barely restrained instinct to lash out at this strange being touching her injury. The cubs watched from behind their mother, their eyes reflecting the fading light, curious and frightened in equal measure. When Maya finished, she stepped back and packed away her supplies. Her medical kit was now depleted, the majority of her supplies used on a creature that might still kill her. She looked at the Rift Stalker, at the cubs pressed against their mother's side, and felt a strange sense of peace with her decision. "That is all I can do," Maya said. "The rest is up to you. Your body needs to fight the infection and heal. Your cubs need food. I cannot help with that." The Rift Stalker's eyes followed her as she backed away, returning to the ridge where she had first observed the scene. Maya climbed back up and found a sheltered position where she could watch the ravine below. She did not know why she stayed. Logic said she should leave immediately, continue north toward the extraction point. But something kept her there, a need to know if her intervention would make any difference. She watched through the night as the mother Rift Stalker rested with her cubs. She saw the creatures breathing slow and steady, suggesting the pain was being managed. She saw the cubs curl against their mother, secure in her presence even though danger surrounded them. As dawn approached, Maya finally forced herself to leave. She had lost a full day to this detour, and the clock was still running on her challenge. Maya pushed north with renewed urgency. She had lost precious time with the Rift Stalker, and now she needed to make up distance if she hoped to reach the extraction point before the 20-day deadline. The terrain continued to shift as she descended from the highlands into the denser lowland forests. Here, the trees grew so thick that their canopy blocked most sunlight, creating a world of green twilight punctuated by bioluminescent fungi that clung to bark and stone. Her body was adapting, growing stronger in the high gravity. Movements that had been exhausting in the first days now felt merely difficult. Her muscles had hardened. Her endurance increased. Maya realized this was one advantage humans possessed that more physically powerful species might not: rapid adaptation. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, creatures who might not be the fastest or strongest, but who could keep going long after others collapsed from exhaustion. On the 12th day, Maya's monitoring band vibrated again. She checked the display. 29 challengers remain in competition. More than 70 beings had withdrawn or failed. The attrition rate was higher than any previous arena challenge on record. HFY 9 was proving more dangerous than the collective had anticipated, or perhaps the challengers this year were simply less prepared. Maya wondered how many of Earth's representatives remained. She hoped at least some had survived, that humanity would have something to show for their participation. The forest began showing signs of other challengers. Maya found campsites, equipment caches, markers left on trees. Some were recent, suggesting she was close to the main route toward the extraction point. She moved more carefully now, aware that encounters with other challengers could be as dangerous as predators. Not all species valued cooperation, and resources were limited. Some might see her as competition to be eliminated rather than a fellow participant. On the 13th day, as Maya crossed a stream swollen by recent rains, she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was a roar, deep and familiar, coming from somewhere behind her. The Rift Stalker. But this roar was different from the distressed calls she had heard days ago. This was stronger, more vital. Maya felt a surge of relief. The mother had survived. The medical treatment had worked, or at least had bought enough time for the creature's own biology to fight off infection. She continued forward, but her mind kept returning to the injured Rift Stalker and her cubs. Maya had violated the principle of non-interference, had used resources meant for her own survival to help a predator that could easily kill her. By the collective's standards, it had been a foolish decision, one that demonstrated humanity's tendency toward irrational emotional responses. Yet Maya could not bring herself to regret it. Those cubs would have died. Now they had a chance. The 14th day brought new challenges. The forest gave way to a region of geothermal activity where steam vents erupted from the ground and pools of boiling water created natural barriers. Maya navigated carefully, using her knowledge of geology to identify safe paths. She saw evidence that other challengers had struggled here. Discarded equipment lay near a vent that had probably erupted unexpectedly. Scorch marks on nearby trees told of someone who had gotten too close to superheated steam. That evening, as she made camp in a cave warmed by geothermal heat, Maya reviewed her progress. She was roughly 200 kilometers from the extraction point, with 6 days remaining. If she maintained her current pace, she would arrive with perhaps a day to spare. It would be close, but possible. She allowed herself a small meal of foraged plants and one of her last nutrient bars, then settled in to rest. She woke to the sound of footsteps outside her cave. Maya's hand went immediately to her blade as she pressed herself against the cave wall, trying to see who or what approached. Through the entrance, backlit by the bioluminescent forest, she saw a figure. Not a predator. Another challenger. The being was a Kralix, one of the crystalline warriors who had dominated the preliminary challenges. The Kralix stood nearly 3 meters tall, its 4 arms ending in natural blade-like protrusions. It carried no pack, and its crystalline hide showed cracks and damage that suggested hard fighting. The being's eyes fixed on Maya's position, and it spoke, the translator rendering its words. "Small human, I tracked your movements through the geothermal zone. Your pathfinding was efficient. I require knowledge of the terrain ahead." Maya remained still, assessing the situation. The Kralix was injured and apparently lost. Its pride would not allow it to admit defeat and trigger the emergency beacon, but it recognized that Maya had skills it lacked. "What do I receive in exchange for this knowledge?" she asked carefully. The Kralix's crystals shifted color slightly, a sign of irritation. "You receive the privilege of my temporary protection. This region contains pack hunters that would overwhelm a lone human. With my combat ability and your navigational skills, we both increase our survival probability." It was logical, and Maya recognized the value of temporary alliance. She emerged from the cave slowly, keeping her blade sheathed. I am traveling to the extraction point. If our paths align, we can travel together. But I will not deviate from my route. The Kralix nodded, a gesture that translated across most species. Agreed. The extraction point is my destination as well. You lead, human. I will guard our rear approach. They traveled together for the next 2 days, an unlikely pairing that proved effective. Maya navigated terrain while the Kralix dealt with predators that approached. The warriors' combat skills were impressive, dispatching mid-sized hunters with brutal efficiency. Maya noticed the beings seemed to be learning from their journey, observing how she read signs in the environment and identified safe paths. On the second evening of their alliance, the Kralix spoke again. You placed 99th in the preliminary challenges. I placed 7th. Yet here, in practical survival, your ranking proves irrelevant. The collective's testing methods measure combat prowess and physical capability but fail to account for environmental intelligence. This seems a significant oversight. Maya smiled slightly. Every species brings different strengths. Your people evolved on a high-gravity world rich in crystalline formations. You are warriors by nature. My people evolved as generalists on a world of diverse environments. We are adapters by nature. Neither approach is superior, only different. The Kralix made a sound that might have been agreement. Perhaps. Though I note your people's approach requires more humility. We Kralix know our strengths and display them openly. You humans seem to hide your capabilities until circumstance demands their revelation. On the 16th day, they encountered a scene of devastation. Another challenger had been killed, the body partially consumed by scavengers. The Kralix examined the remains while Maya looked for clues about what had killed the being. She found tracks, massive prints pressed deep into soft earth. Rift Stalker tracks, but not the same individual she had treated. These prints were larger, the stride longer. A male, probably, defending territory or hunting. We should move quickly, the Kralix said, crystals darkening with concern. Apex predators in feeding territories are extremely aggressive. They pushed hard through that day and into the night, putting distance between themselves and the kill site. By dawn of the 17th day, they had entered the final approach zone toward the extraction point. The terrain was becoming more familiar, matching maps Maya had studied. They were close now, perhaps 40 kilometers from their goal. That morning, the Kralix stopped suddenly, its crystals turning nearly black. I hear combat, the warrior said. Multiple beings fighting, this direction. It pointed east, perpendicular to their route. Maya listened and heard it too, faint sounds of conflict carried on the wind. We should avoid it, she said. Fighting between challengers violates the challenge protocols, but desperation makes beings unpredictable. The Kralix hesitated, then nodded. They altered their path, swinging wide to avoid whatever conflict was occurring. But as they moved, the sounds grew louder, closer. Whatever was happening was mobile, coming toward them. The Kralix readied its natural weapons, taking a defensive stance. Maya drew her blade, knowing it would be nearly useless against any serious threat. Through the trees, she saw movement, not challengers fighting each other, challengers fighting something else. 3 beings, 2 Vexnar, and what looked like a Dulrathi, were attempting to fend off a pack of predators. The creatures attacking them were spine stalkers, the same species Maya had encountered early in her journey, but in much greater numbers. At least a dozen of the mid-sized predators circled the trapped challengers, darting in to slash with claws before retreating. The Kralix growled. We assist. Predators attacking in coordinated packs threaten all challengers in this region. If we allow this, we may face the same pack later when they have grown bolder from success. Maya wanted to argue, wanted to point out that involving themselves in others' fights was not required and would deplete their own resources. but she recognized the truth in the Kralix's words. More than that, she recognized the same impulse that had driven her to help the injured Rift Stalker. Sometimes the right choice was not the smart choice. The Kralix charged forward with a battle roar, crystalline arms reflecting sunlight like blades. Maya followed, moving to flank the pack rather than engage directly. She could not fight like the Kralix, but she could disrupt and distract. As the Spine Stalkers turned to face the new threat, Maya shouted and threw stones, drawing some of the pack's attention. The trapped challengers rallied, using the momentary reprieve to reorganize their defense. The fight was brutal and brief. The Kralix killed 3 Spine Stalkers in rapid succession, its combat prowess overwhelming. Maya managed to wound one creature that focused on her, driving her blade deep into its shoulder joint when it overextended. The pack broke and scattered as it became clear the prey had become too dangerous to hunt. Within minutes, the predators had vanished into the forest, leaving behind 2 dead pack members and several wounded survivors limping away. The rescued challengers approached cautiously. One of the Vexnar, breathing heavily from exertion, spoke first. "You had no obligation to assist. We are grateful. I am Sethis of the Vexnar delegation." The Kralix nodded acknowledgement. "I am Corinth. This is Maya, the human. We traveled to the extraction point and saw you needed aid." The Dulrathi, who appeared elderly by their species standards, examined Maya with interest. "You are the human who placed 99th. There has been discussion among the remaining challengers about your progress. Many expected you to withdraw in the first days, yet here you are, nearing completion of the challenge." Maya felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I simply moved forward, one step at a time. Survival is not complex, only difficult." Sethis made a sound like laughter. "You speak truth, human. Though I note your blade carries blood, and your companion shows great respect for your guidance. These details suggest you are more capable than your preliminary ranking indicated." They traveled together toward the extraction point, the group now numbering 5. The Spine Stalker pack did not return, and other predators seemed to avoid the larger group. By evening of the 17th day, they could see the extraction zone in the distance, a cleared area marked with beacon lights visible even through the forest canopy. Maya felt relief wash over her. She was going to complete the challenge. After 19 days of constant danger, physical exhaustion, and persistent doubt, she was going to reach the endpoint. Earth's 99th place challenger would not be a failure. She would finish, and that meant something. They made camp that final night within sight of the extraction zone, but protocol required they wait until the 20th day to officially complete. The group shared a fire and what food remained in their supplies. The Dulrathi told stories of previous arena challenges, competitions on different worlds with different dangers. Corinth, the Kralix, spoke of his homeworld's warrior traditions. Sethis described the Vexnar philosophy of speed as both physical and mental attribute. When they asked Maya about humanity, she found herself struggling to articulate what made her people special. "We are not the strongest," she said slowly. "We are not the fastest or smartest. We did not evolve on the most hostile world or develop the most advanced technology, but we are stubborn. We help each other even when it is illogical. We refuse to accept that our limitations define our potential. Every human knows we are small in a vast universe, but we choose to matter anyway." The others listened in silence. Then the Dulrathi spoke, voice thoughtful. "That is perhaps the most dangerous quality a species can possess, not strength that can be overcome, but refusal to accept defeat that persists regardless of circumstances." The dawn of the 20th day arrived clear and bright. The 5 challengers broke camp and walked together toward the extraction zone. As they emerged from the tree line, they saw the official observation post, a structure that had been erected specifically for the challenge completion. Collective officials waited there, along with medical personnel and recording equipment that had been documenting the entire challenge. They were among the first to arrive. Throughout the morning, other challengers emerged from various directions, 23 in total who had successfully completed the 20-day survival trial. Maya saw 2 other humans among the survivors and felt pride that humanity had not completely failed. Earth had sent 100 representatives, and 3 had completed the final challenge. It was not impressive by collective standards, but it was better than the galaxy had expected. The officials began processing the survivors, conducting medical evaluations and downloading data from monitoring bands. Maya submitted to the examination, answering questions about her route and experiences. When asked about significant events, she mentioned the geothermal zones, the pack hunters, and helping fellow challengers. She did not mention the Rift Stalker. That felt private. A decision she had made for herself that did not need to be part of any official record. She was sitting near the observation post, eating real food for the first time in 20 days when she heard it. That familiar roar coming from the forest they had just exited. Every being in the extraction zone turned toward the sound. Several officials activated defensive systems, preparing for an apex predator approaching their position. The Rift Stalker emerged from the tree line slowly, deliberately. It was the same one Maya had treated. She recognized the scar pattern, the slightly darker coloration along its left flank. The creature was healthy now, the wound healed, moving with the power and grace of an apex predator in its prime. Behind the Rift Stalker walked the 2 cubs, larger than when Maya had last seen them but still clearly juveniles. The observation post erupted in controlled chaos. Officials shouted orders. Defensive weapons charged. The other challengers backed away from the edge of the clearing. But the Rift Stalker was not attacking. It approached at a steady walk, eyes fixed on a specific target, on Maya. She stood slowly as the creature approached, her heart hammering but her mind strangely calm. The Rift Stalker stopped 5 meters away, and for a long moment, being and beast regarded each other. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, the Rift Stalker lowered its head slightly, a gesture that in many species indicated acknowledgement or respect. The cubs mimicked their mother's behavior, their smaller bodies dipping forward. Maya bowed in return, a formal gesture she did not fully understand, but which felt appropriate. The Rift Stalker held her gaze for another moment, then turned and walked back toward the forest. The cubs followed, glancing back once before disappearing into the trees. The clearing remained silent for several seconds. Then Arch Coordinator Veleth approached Maya, the official's expression unreadable. "Explain what we just witnessed," Veleth demanded. Maya took a breath. "During my journey, I encountered an injured Rift Stalker with cubs. I provided medical treatment. The creature has now recovered, and it came to acknowledge that, I think." Veleth's eyes narrowed. "You encountered an apex predator and chose to approach it rather than avoid? This directly violated the guidance provided regarding Rift Stalkers." "The guidance said to avoid them whenever possible," Maya replied carefully. "I judged that leaving an injured mother to die while her cubs starved was not necessary. So I helped, then I left. The creature has now observed that I completed my challenge, and it acknowledged that. I believe we have concluded our interaction." Other officials gathered, speaking rapidly among themselves. Maya caught fragments of their discussion. Violation of protocol, unprecedented behavior, interference with natural ecosystem. Also, remarkable restraint, unusual intelligence, documentation required. Her monitoring band's recordings were immediately requested and downloaded, officials reviewing everything that had happened during her encounter with the Rift Stalker. Corinth the Kralix approached her. Crystals shimmering with colors Maya had learned indicated approval. "I retract my earlier assessment," the warrior said. Humanity is not merely adapter species, you are bridge builders, forging connections where none should exist. The Rift Stalker is an apex predator, a creature of pure instinct and territorial aggression, yet it responded to your assistance with understanding. This suggests capacities beyond what our preliminary testing measured. Over the following hours, as all surviving challengers gathered at the extraction point, Maya found herself the subject of intense attention. The recordings of her encounter with the Rift Stalker had been reviewed by senior officials, and opinions were divided. Some argued she had violated challenge protocols by interfering with indigenous life beyond what survival required. Others pointed out that she had harmed nothing, had actually preserved life rather than taken it, and that her actions demonstrated problem-solving abilities of high value. The debate became moot when the final challenger arrived, triggering their beacon just minutes before the deadline. 24 beings had completed the challenge out of 100 who started. The survival rate was the lowest in Arena Challenge history, making HFY 9 officially the most difficult proving ground ever used. Among the survivors, humanity had 3 representatives: Maya Chen, who had placed 99th in preliminaries, Marcus Webb, who had placed 43rd, and Sarah Okonkwo, who had placed 38th. Velith announced that all survivors would be granted full ranking adjustments based on their completion of the challenge. The preliminary rankings were considered provisional, and completion of HFY 9 demonstrated capabilities that superseded earlier testing. More significantly, species whose representatives had survived would be granted full consideration for collective advancement opportunities. That evening, as survivors prepared to be transported back to the orbital station, Maya stood at the edge of the clearing, looking out at the forest. She thought about everything that had happened, the fear and exhaustion and small victories that had comprised her 20 days. She thought about the Rift Stalker and her cubs, about the fact that she had made a difference in at least one small corner of this vast alien world. Corinth joined her, standing in companionable silence for a moment. "What do you think happens next for your species?" the Kralix finally asked. Maya considered the question. "I think we continue doing what we have always done. We adapt. We help where we can. We refuse to give up even when we are told we cannot succeed. Humanity placed 99th, and we completed the challenge. That will not change the minds of every species in the collective, but it will make some reconsider. And that is enough for now." The Kralix nodded slowly. "You speak wisdom. Though I suspect your encounter with the Rift Stalker will have consequences beyond what you anticipate. The recordings are being transmitted throughout the collective networks. Beings across the galaxy are witnessing a 99th ranked human treating an apex predator with compassion and skill. This creates narrative." Maya felt a chill of apprehension. She had not wanted attention, had only wanted to complete the challenge and return home. "What kind of narrative?" "The kind that changes perception," Corinth replied. "The collective has operated for millions of years on principles of strength, capability, and advancement. Your species challenges those principles not through superior force, but through different values. This makes some beings uncomfortable. It also makes some beings curious about what humanity might contribute that we have not considered valuable." The transport shuttles arrived as HFY 9's sun set, bathing the clearing in amber light. Maya boarded with the other survivors, taking a seat near a viewport where she could watch the planet recede as they climbed toward orbit. She saw the vast forests, the mountain ranges, the rivers cutting through valleys. Somewhere down there, a Rift Stalker mother was teaching her cubs to hunt, cubs who would have died without intervention. The orbital station seemed almost absurdly comfortable after 20 days in wilderness. Maya was given quarters, proper food, medical attention for minor injuries she had barely noticed during the challenge. Over the next several days, as official evaluations continued, she learned more about what had happened during the challenges. 76 beings had withdrawn or been extracted unconscious. Of those, 12 had suffered serious injuries, and 3 had died despite emergency extraction, victims of predators that had killed them before rescue could arrive. The mortality rate was unprecedented, and there was already discussion about whether Kyvor 9 had been an appropriate choice for arena challenges. Maya also learned that her recordings had indeed been transmitted throughout the collective. The encounter with the Rift Stalker had gone viral, in the galactic sense of the term. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds had watched the human who placed 99th Approach, an apex predator, provide medical treatment, and then walk away. They had watched the same predator later approach the human in acknowledgement, an action that xenobiologists agreed was extraordinary for a non-sentient species. Opinions varied wildly. Some species viewed it as foolish sentimentality, humans wasting resources on creatures that could provide no benefit. Others saw it as evidence of unusual cognitive flexibility and emotional intelligence. Academic institutions requested permission to interview Maya. Media networks wanted her for broadcasts. The attention was overwhelming. On the 5th day after extraction, Maya was summoned to a meeting with senior collective officials. She arrived at a conference chamber to find representatives from dozens of species, including the collective's High Council. Arch Coordinator Veleth stood at the center of the room. Maya Chen of Humanity, Veleth began formally. Your completion of the Kyvor 9 challenge has generated significant discussion. Your actions, particularly regarding the injured Rift Stalker, have been analyzed extensively. While some council members believe you violated the spirit of the challenge by deviating from direct survival concerns, the majority have concluded that you demonstrated initiative, xenobiological expertise, and ethical decision-making under pressure. These qualities are valued by the collective. Maya remained silent, uncertain what was expected. Veleth continued. Additionally, your recordings have revealed something unexpected. The Rift Stalker species has been observed for decades, and never have we witnessed behavior suggesting they are capable of gratitude or acknowledgement toward other species. Your interaction has prompted a complete re-evaluation of their cognitive capabilities. This discovery alone represents a significant contribution to collective xenobiological knowledge. A being Maya did not recognize stepped forward, a species whose flowing form suggested aquatic origins. I am Scholar Merlith, specializing in cognitive evolution. I have reviewed your encounter extensively, human. The Rift Stalker's response to your assistance demonstrates recognition of altruistic behavior and capacity for emotional reciprocation. These traits suggest proto-sentience, a developmental stage we rarely observe. Your decision to provide aid, against self-interest and logical assessment, created conditions for this observation. I ask, what drove your choice? Maya thought carefully before responding. I saw a mother protecting her young. I saw cubs that would die without intervention. My species evolved as social creatures who help each other survive. We extended that instinct to other species on our world, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. When I saw the Rift Stalker, I did not see a dangerous predator. I saw a mother in need. So I helped, because that is what humans do. The chamber filled with soft sounds, various species equivalents of thoughtful murmurs. Scholar Merlith spoke again. This capacity for empathy across species boundaries is rare among collective members. Most species extend altruism only to their own kind or to beings they judge useful. Your people seem to extend it broadly, even recklessly. This creates vulnerability, but also opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. Another official, a Kralix elder, stood. I have read reports from Warrior Corinth, who traveled with this human during the final days of the challenge. He states that the human's navigational and survival skills exceeded any demonstrated in preliminary testing. Her tactical awareness prevented multiple dangerous encounters, and her willingness to assist other challengers without expectation of reward reflected principles we Kraliks value highly, even if we often fail to practice them ourselves. I propose humanity be granted accelerated consideration for collective advancement programs. The discussion continued for over an hour, various officials debating humanity's qualities and potential contributions. Maya sat quietly, aware that decisions about her species' future were being made based partly on her actions. The weight of responsibility was crushing. But she reminded herself that she had only done what felt right in the moment. Overthinking might have led to paralysis. Finally, Velith called for formal decision. The vote was recorded, and the result announced. By majority consensus, humanity is granted accelerated advancement consideration within the collective framework. Your species will be offered immediate access to scientific exchange programs, cultural integration initiatives, and economic development opportunities. These offers are extended based on demonstrated capabilities during the arena challenges, with particular weight given to innovative problem-solving and ethical flexibility demonstrated by multiple human participants, with special recognition for Maya Chen's actions. Maya felt emotions she could not name: relief, pride, anxiety about what came next. Hope that humanity would prove worthy of this opportunity. She bowed formally. On behalf of my species, I thank the collective for this consideration. Humanity will work to earn the trust you have placed in us. Over the following days, as arrangements were made for the human delegation to return to Earth, Maya found moments to reflect on everything that had happened. She had entered the arena challenges as the 99th ranked participant, someone the galaxy expected to fail quickly. She had survived through stubbornness, adaptation, and a willingness to help even when it served no immediate purpose. In the process, she had changed, at least slightly, how the collective viewed humanity. The other human survivors, Marcus and Sarah, had their own stories of survival and challenge. Together, the three of them represented humanity's resilience and potential. They recorded messages for Earth, knowing the entire planet had been watching and waiting for news. We placed 99th, 43rd, and 38th in preliminary testing, Maya said to the camera. The galaxy judged us weak and unremarkable. But we survived where others did not. We helped where we could. We refused to accept that our limitations defined our potential. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us worthy of standing among the stars. On the final day before departure, Maya walked through the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Corinth found her there, the Kralix warrior moving with surprising quietness for such a large being. "You changed something," Corinth said without preamble. "Not just for your species, but for all of us." The Rift Stalker recordings are being studied by every major academic institution in the collective. Philosophers debate what it means that a low-ranked species showed greater wisdom than high-ranked ones. Your action was small, treating one injured creature, but its ripples spread far. Maya smiled slightly. "I just helped a mother protect her cubs. Everything else is what others decided it meant." "Perhaps," Corinth replied, "but meaning is how we build understanding between species. Your meaning, your human meaning, is teaching the galaxy something we had forgotten or never knew. That strength is not only physical power, that rank is not destiny. That the smallest gesture of compassion can matter more than the greatest display of force." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Two beings from vastly different worlds who had learned to respect each other through shared trials. When the transport ship departed the next day, carrying the human survivors back to Earth, Maya looked out at the receding station and thought about the Rift Stalker and her cubs, about Corinth and the other challengers she had met, about the vast, incredible diversity of life that filled the galaxy. Humanity had placed 99th. But 99th had been enough. Sometimes being enough was everything.